Welcome back to CBS Sports HQ, presented by Canva. Love your work. Week 14 of the NFL season gets underway tonight. Thursday night football, you know what that means. Pull out your fantasy team. Get set to set your lineups as we get set to go through some of the starts and sits of Week 14 with Jamey, Eisenberg, and Dave Richard. Their start of the week, Tua Tagovailoa. So I turn things over to the guys now. Jamey, explain yourself with this one.
I will do my best, Jordan. Thank you very much. I'm excited about Tua. You know, he's actually been the best fantasy quarterback over the last 3 weeks, 29 or more points in each of those 3 games, Dave. Wow. And it's a good matchup against the Jets. We don't expect at this point Sauce Gardner to play. That may actually be a negative because he's been so bad in terms of coverage. But they are actually good in terms of their fantasy points allowed to opposing quarterbacks, except when you see what's happened to them recently. 2 of the last 3 quarterbacks over 30 fantasy points. Now, a lot of the production from quarterbacks lately has come from guys using their legs. I don't think that will be the case for Tua, but he's just so locked in right now with 3 of his main pass catchers, hopefully 4 in terms of Jalen Waddle will join the party, but you're looking at Tyreek Hill and Jonnu Smith and Devon Achane. Actually, if you look at Jonnu Smith's numbers over the last 3 weeks, Dave, he is a top 13 quarterback. That's how good he's been from his production. 21.3 points per game on average. That's quarterback numbers. So Jonnu's obviously benefiting from Tua. You're seeing what Tyreek Hill has done. Now, some of it's been a little fluky garbage time. We saw the tip pass, for example, to get Tua over 29 fantasy points last week in garbage time against the Packers. But this Jets defense is so bad. It feels like they've quit. I think Tua's going to come out. Still, Dolphins have playoff aspirations. They're chasing right now the Broncos and the Chargers, but I think they have an opportunity to still make a strong push here. It's going to be a big division game at home, and I think Tua's got top 5, maybe top 3 upside. Remember, 6 teams are on a bye. You're looking for quarterbacks with a lot of potential, and he has it.
What do you think of the Dolphins' run game as far as just purely running the football between their offensive line? You think highly of it? You think it's just okay, or you think it stinks?
I think it's okay. It would not surprise me if they have a good game this week because the Jets don't tackle. But I think you're looking at it again. This is Tua's offense right now. He's getting the ball out quick. The run game has really been an extension of the short passing game. The short passing has been an extension of the run game.
Yes.
This is an opportunity here, as you see. Both of you and I are very high on Tua.
I don't think they can run the ball, even against the Jets, even with all those missed tackles. And they're just going to keep doing what they've been doing, those short dink and dunk throws. This isn't a prolific offense by any stretch, Jamey. You know this, you've seen it. But the Jets, who've given up at least 29 fantasy points to 2 of the last 3 quarterbacks, will either have to make the decision to just buckle down against those short throws and take their chances deep, or to play deep and let Tua just pick them apart a little bit at a time. He's going to throw a lot. He's going to fall into good production. 3 touchdowns on deck for Tua Tagovailoa.
Other starts for me this week include the #1 pickup of the week, which is Isaac Guerendo, another quarterback in Baker Mayfield. We got the revenge game for Calvin Ridley. I think it'll be a big game for Jacoby Myers taking on that Bucs defense, and Brian Thomas Jr. in that same game with Calvin Ridley. I think we could actually see a shootout between the Jaguars and the Titans. But in terms of Isaac Guerendo, everybody wants to know, should you start him right away? Well, the answer is yes. The Bears' run defense has been very forgiving, but really it's more about what the San Francisco offense should be able to produce. I would love, for a variety of reasons, football, not football related, to see Trent Williams out there playing, dealing with an ankle injury, also a personal situation. That would make things much better for the 49ers offensive line. But we've seen Guerendo now in 2 games with double digits in touches. He had 10 carries for 99 yards against the Seahawks, including a 76-yard run. We saw 14 carries, 85 yards, and a touchdown and 3 catches against the Cowboys. That's what I'm hoping for him. 17 to 20 total touches. If that happens, he could be where Heath has him ranked as a top 12 running back. For Baker Mayfield, he's coming off a disappointing game. As you recall, was my start of the week for week 13. Did not deliver a strong performance, one of his worst games of the season. But I think he bounces back this week against the Raiders. Now, we had a fun conversation on our Fantasy Football Today podcast about, is Baker struggling because the run game is being productive? You got Bucky Irving dealing with a hip injury. He's expected to be fine. But I think you still look at Baker and the opportunity here against the Raiders defense that is still beat up in the secondary, missing a couple corners in the last couple of games. We'll see if they get healthy. But I think Mike Evans is going to get his numbers. It's the second guy. Can he find a touchdown to Cade Otton or maybe one of the other receivers? Maybe throws a touchdown to one of the running backs. I still think you value Baker Mayfield based on his body of work, not what happened last week, not what's happened the last 2 games with the run game really taking over. Baker's got a chance here to still be a top 5 fantasy quarterback. All right, Dave, let's take a look at your starts. We differ on Brock Purdy. He's one of the guys that you like for this week. Tyrone Tracy, Isaiah Pacheco, Jerry Jeudy, and Juwan Johnson. Also, start with Purdy. Why do you like him taking on the Bears this week?
I almost feel like we forgot just how good he was. Before his injury, he had 3 straight games with 20 or more fantasy points, 3 games with at least 27 fantasy points. In the 4 games between week 6 through 10, he was rolling. And his offensive line is a factor. You brought up Trent Williams, and if he doesn't have them, yeah, that's a problem. But Chicago's defense has just 7 sacks, quarterbacks in its past 4 games. They've had Montez Sweat for all 4 of those games. They've been struggling. I don't think the change of coaching is going to make that big of a difference. And we talk about Isaac Guerrero as if he's going to be locked in, sure thing, no doubt, superstar fantasy running back. And you and I don't have him as a top 12 running back. Heath does. That's a little aggressive. I think Brock Purdy is going to carry this offense. And I think he's a good low-end starter this week. Not a top 5 guy by any stretch. I would much rather start Tua. I'd much rather start Baker Mayfield, but I think he can get back to that 20-point range, which is where we saw him before the injury.
My only concern with Brock Purdy is, well, that's not my only concern. I have a few concerns. My concern about it is he healthy? Because he's playing, I think, for his team, not necessarily to. I just don't think he's 100%. I think he's gutting it out and being a good teammate. And so we saw it last week. It was in the snow, hard to judge based on what that was there. But you go back to the Arizona game. You say he's gotten his numbers. He got a rushing touchdown against the Cardinals. He threw for under 200 yards in that game and 1 touchdown. We haven't seen the multiple touchdown games from him recently. And I just wonder, shoulder injury, tough Bears defense that's still very minimal production. Number 2 in terms of fewest fantasy points allowed to opposing quarterbacks.
But that's on the year. The past few weeks,
it's totally on the year. But again, it's still a credit to them. There's only been 3 quarterbacks to get multiple touchdowns against them throwing. I think he's going to have to do something with his legs here. Maybe he does. I just don't love the setup for Brock Purdy. This feels like a try and get your win game as opposed to do whatever you want to game. And you always do get the new coach bump. So we'll see if that helps the Bears. Talk to me about Isaiah Pacheco, because he wasn't great last week, but a little bit better matchup this week for the Chiefs taking on the Chargers.
Yeah, he didn't play a lot last week. It was his first game back. We've seen Andy Reid ease in players when they're back off of injury, and we saw that. He had a 34-yard run, looked like the old school Pacheco, not old school, same guy, the Pacheco of old, pre-injury Pacheco, let's just call it that, and that was the longest run by any Chiefs player this year. So I think Andy Reid can't afford to keep him on the bench when Kareem Hunt's getting like 3 yards per carry. He looks terrible. Pacheco gives them a jolt. I would suspect he's going to play 2/3 of the snaps. We also saw him catch the ball a little bit before he got hurt way back in September. And you talked about, Jamey, that Chargers run defense, 4.6 yards per carry to running backs in their past 5 games and on the year. 4 running backs have 100 or more total yards in their past 7 games. I think we can see Pacheco pick up a couple of catches, total 100 yards, hopefully find the end zone.
Let's go to your sits now, and you got Justin Herbert on this list, which is interesting because prior to the last couple of games, he was coming on and starting to look like one of the better fantasy quarterbacks. James Conner, Garrett Wilson, a lot of big names on this sit list, Dave, and a couple of Falcons and Darnell Mooney and Kyle Pitts. But why are you sitting Justin Herbert? And let's assume Ladd McConkey is playing, because that's clearly a big part of it.
Yeah, and if McConkey isn't playing, then he falls even further down my quarterback rankings. The matchup's great. We've seen Kansas City do well or do poorly against quarterbacks as recently as last week. But he's struggled, and his offensive line hasn't been as good as we thought it would be. And his run game is a mess right now. And the receiving core that the Chargers really didn't do a lot to address other than add McConkey in the draft is kind of letting him down outside of McConkey. And McConkey, speaking of players who aren't at 100%, Jamey, he's not at 100% for this game. And so I just wonder if this is going to be a low-scoring game between these two teams. Could Kansas City just kind of play at a slow pace and force the Chargers to really be limited in their playing time? I don't think the Chargers want to have Justin Herbert throw a lot. I don't think they want him to run a lot either. I think this defense is better than what they've been showing. I am nervous that Justin Herbert's going to get back over that 20-point range.
All right, you say better than they've been showing. 2 Raiders quarterbacks, Bryce Young, Bo Nix, and Josh Allen, who's obviously on a different level. All of those guys, 18.5 fantasy points or more. I think if he gets 18 to 20 points, he's going to be maybe a top 10 quarterback, just given 6 teams on a bye. Wow. I hope McConkey's out there. I actually do like Justin Herbert. I would start Herbert, for example, over Brock Purdy, because I think the setup's a little bit better for him. Why are you saying James Conner?
Seattle's defense in the past 3 games, and this is since their bye, 4.1 yards per carry allowed to running backs, 0 touchdowns allowed to running backs. The last time these 2 teams played, Conner had 8 rushing yards. That's 8. Not even 10. He did a little bit in the receiving game. It's been a while since he's had a monster game against Seattle. It's been a while since he's had a monster game at all. 3.5 yards per carry in his past 4. I'm nervous about him and that offensive line for Arizona not being able to help him get big numbers for fantasy managers. He's at best a low-end number 2 running back.
Yeah, and you see it, the 6 teams on a bye, so 21 is probably more like 31 on a normal week for us, just based on who's missing with the 6 teams that are not playing this week. All right, sits for me, a couple of guys that are in the same game, Kyler Murray and DK Metcalf. I am sitting Brock Purdy. I am sitting Deebo Samuel as well. Chuba Hubbard, I was very disappointed with his lack of work in the passing game last week with no targets. Jonathan Brooks maybe taking on that role as the pass-catching running back for the Panthers, and the Eagles' defense is obviously not exactly exactly a team that you want to face. For Kyler Murray, look, he's been struggling. 3 of his last 4 games under 20 fantasy points. He had one of those games against the Seahawks. Their pass defense has been pretty fantastic of late, and this is not just a good spot for him in terms of Kyler Murray. I hope I'm wrong, because I'd like to see Kyler get back to being Kyler. Schedule gets much better for him moving forward. Gets New England, for example, in Week 15, so don't give up on Kyler Murray just yet, but I would not start him in Week 14. For DK Metcalf, it's very hard to sit someone like this, very similar to James Conner, hard to sit someone like this, but you see he is not ranked as a top 24 wide receiver for me going into this matchup. He has been bad the last 2 games. I don't think he's healthy, dealing with a shoulder injury, dealing with a knee injury that he suffered against the Jets. He's going to hopefully play through this, but this matchup has been awful for him historically. In his last 5 games against Arizona, he is averaging 10.8 PPR points or less. He has 1 touchdown in his last 5 games, last 6 games actually, against the Cardinals. And so you're looking at a defense that has done a great job against, for the most part, #1 wide receivers. They shut him out 2 weeks ago, held him under 11 PPR points. And so Metcalf is just not the #1 guy for Geno Smith right now, and Geno's struggling. So when you have a quarterback struggling, when you have an offense that's struggling to throw the ball, and a defense that's been fantastic against opposing wide receivers and opposing quarterbacks, DK Metcalf is more of a sit than a start. So again, I'd only start him in 3 receiver leagues. All right, that'll do it for us here for our starts and our sits. Check out more of our content on CBSSports.com. Check out our podcast as well, Fantasy Football Today. You can download the QR code and make it easy for yourself, but also check out the Fantasy Football Today podcast, and you can watch us on YouTube. We will help you with all of your Week 14 dilemmas. The fantasy playoffs are coming. Make sure we're there to help you get the lineup information that you need.